Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those of you who are joining us from across the world today. We are delighted and honored to have with us Tolmia Gregory, climate justice activist and digital artist, recently featured on Forbes as one of the UK's leading environmentalists. She's also been featured on the BBC. So welcome to Pandemic Punditry, Tolmia.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to connect with people from across the world. So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Oh, you're most welcome. I know that, so there must be some story behind, why you've, at a very early age, and I think it was something like 11 years old, compelled you to sort of become a climate activist. What's the story there? What inspired you to do that?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I was 11 actually when I started my online platform, and that was really nothing to do with climate activism in any shape or form.
Okay.
When I was younger, growing up, I always wanted to be a fashion designer. So when I was 11, I thought, how can I express myself and my love for fashion? And one way of doing that was to create a blog and a website to kind of talk about my love of fashion. And my whole family has kind of grown up very quite interested in the digital world. So kind of combined those two together and started my website. And yeah, it was very much fashion focused, talking about what I was wearing or what celebrities were wearing. And then a few years in 2013, the Rana Plaza garment factory collapse happened in Dhaka in Bangladesh.
Yes, I remember that.
Yes, and I remember that was kind of my first moment of realizing, oh, the fashion industry might not be as kind of glamorous and amazing as I thought it was. And so kind of in the aftermath of that, I heard that there was a documentary being made called The True Cost. And I was still running my blog at the time, and then I watched the documentary, and it was kind of like a light bulb moment where I realized, again, fashion, it has a huge role to play in people's lives and the planet as well. And I realized I needed to start using my online platform in a way of educating other people, especially at such a young age. I realized other people my age, friends and whatever, probably also had no idea about the reality of where our clothes were coming from. And so, yeah, ever since that moment, I've been trying my best to use my platform in the most positive way possible. And at the beginning, it was very much from kind of an ethical human rights standpoint, and kind of realizing, over 1,000 garment workers died in that horrific incident.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone wearing clothes and loving fashion, I had a role to play in kind of not, I can't stop that from happening again, but I can educate people and say, hey, this is something that we need to care about. But slowly, in time, I realized, again, the sustainable side of it was also really important because it's all sort of linked, and climate change is a thing. And so that kind of, after a very long journey, has brought me to where I am, realizing that the climate crisis is really the most important issue of our time and the most important issue we probably will ever face. And fashion is part of that, but it's also, it goes into every aspect of life, I think. And so that's kind of where my focus is now, less so on fashion, but more about the climate crisis as a whole.
It's fascinating that you say that we have a lot of young people listening into this particular series of November. We're going to have a whole bunch of young kids who are probably the age that you started your activism, coming on, joining us tomorrow morning for a session, and they're going to tell us their story as how they became Earth Guardians, actually joined that Earth Guardians movement, and what they've done. So it's amazing to see young people. Obviously, it's amazing. It's inspiring in one sense. It's also sad in another sense, right? Because my childhood, I didn't think about the planet. Didn't have to think about the planet. I should have been thinking about the planet, but the awareness was just not there. The crisis was just not there, and we focused on other things as kids, and now I think we have such an undue burden being placed on young people today, essentially to sort of fight for the survival of everyone, including the adults in the world. and I think that's a tremendous burden. So what form, I mean, so you said the garments and the fashion was sort of your initial place. Now you've sort of moved on to larger climactic themes where climate action is climate change is concerned. What is the form that what is the ultimate expression of your activism now? What do you use? I know you're an artist.
Yeah, so as I said, fashion design was always my passion. And then in recent years, I've kind of realized that is not where my energy is needed. I still very much like creating, which is why I'm now an artist. But I just realized, we're in such a dire situation that I need to put that energy into something else. And part of that has been using my art. One thing I'm mostly known for is my gift stickers, which are found on Instagram. And I started those out really just purely selfish reasons. I wanted to kind of make my Instagram content just a bit more fun. And I slowly realized, especially that was back in 2018, I slowly realized that there weren't actually that many gifts tailored to kind of environmental issues. And I realized people were using them as a way to easily convey the message that they were sharing. So over the years, now I've become known for them. And yeah, they're just, art is such a powerful tool when it comes to activism because it really is a way of conveying messages in a very specific way. And the link that's just gone on the screen is a link to my work that I also do for various like sustainable clients. It's also kind of become my job, which is a huge privilege because it gives me the time to do the other side of my activism work. So yeah, I'm just very grateful that I can combine both of those things.
So just to give people a data point that they can sort of chew on, if people are saying, "Oh, what are gifts?" and how these are the, you have 8 billion people have seen your gifts, right? Is that right?
So technically, it's not 8 billion people because that would be more than the entire world.
8 billion times. Sorry.
Yeah, they have been viewed that many times, which is quite wild. And yeah, they've been featured by celebrities on their Instagram accounts, and it is very strange how the artwork you can kind of create in your bedroom can just like go all over the world and be seen by all sorts of people. So yeah, it's very strange, but very cool.
I mean, it's interesting because throughout history, right, whether it's been poets or artists, compelling issues of the time always got expression through art and music, for example, as well, right? And I guess the new medium of this sort of expression is in the digital realm, and you've sort of become a master of one of them and well known for it. So when you create these gifts and then you have people use them, what kind of feedback have you received? I mean, have people sort of said, that compel me to sort of take action or change behavior? Or you must be getting feedback once in a while on things that you create.
Yeah, I think I get more feedback in terms of like, oh, this can help me to do X, Y, Z more through my actual activism work and showing what I'm doing. I think the gift stickers, they're more of a tool for supporting that work that people end up doing. For example, I'll see them being used by activists, in Brazil, and I'm like, that's amazing that people can engage with not only my work, but the specific conversations that they focus on all over the world, because obviously the climate crisis is a global issue. So yeah, I think that to me is one of the most interesting parts of it is seeing the reach and the different sorts of people who are using them.
Karthika?
Right. That's awesome. So that sort of brings us nicely into what we wanted to discuss next, which is when you started out, did you ever think you'd end up on like Forbes or BBC Politics?
I don't think so. No, I think, as I said, I started a blog when I was quite young. So for a few years, I was known as like the teen fashion blogger, and I would be featured in things back then. So actually, I would say, although it's still very strange seeing my name in lists like that, my kind of relationship with like accolades has definitely changed, because now I don't necessarily, kind of like you mentioned about youth activists, having the burden on them. I don't necessarily want praise for what I'm doing because it's kind of the bare minimum in a sense. Like, I don't want, people who have a lot of power and privilege or massive platforms kind of being like, well done, you're so inspiring, because I kind of just want you to get on with the work too. And also, it's become really important to me now when people approach me to kind of like feature me in an article, that I'm not just being featured as a privileged white person, like I want to share or even take a step back and give those platforms to other activists, especially those who are already disproportionately affected by the climate crisis, but also kind of on the front line experiencing it now. My voice is important in its own right, but I don't have as much experience in this as some people already do.
Okay.
I think if I were to summarize sort of what you're doing, and I find it really fascinating from a different perspective, by creating these GIFs, you're actually creating a language or a way to express the the angst, the activism, the call to action that others are feeling, right? So you've created, because it seems that the common way to communicate in these days is through GIFs, right? They create emotions, and they communicate much more effectively than maybe the long written word that people used to do 10 years ago. And so they are an integral part, I think, of how young people communicate today. And then you give voice, and you give the tools for people to communicate these very sort of substantive issues through GIFs, and that itself is a huge service to the movement. Am I summarizing that accurately?
Well, first of all, thank you. And yeah, I think that does summarize it well. And it's a really good point about kind of like long form content, because especially as I did used to write a blog and I produced such, longer form content, like people just don't have the attention span as much anymore. And people are more likely to engage with something that is short and concise and tells them what to do and where to go very quickly than a much longer article, like you say. So yeah, and I think that's why I have kind of really shifted my focus, because I've learned what people are engaging with more.
Katika?
Just reading through your bio and everything when you were preparing for this, Somaya, we noticed that you'd also talked about how you sort of got involved in like non-violent direct action protests and stuff through Extinction Rebellion. So when you're out there protesting, what is your case to say, and who would you like, and who would you want seeing it?
I think obviously it kind of depends on what we're out there for, because as I have learned, especially like the climate crisis is not just one. It's not one issue. We're not just talking about global heating. We're also talking about kind of racial injustice or social injustices that are happening every day. It's about whether the government are supporting homeless people whilst we're in a pandemic, and the fact that pandemics could happen more with the climate crisis, things like that. Like so when you say kind of what would be on your poster, it's like it really depends on the day, because there are so many issues we have to focus on. And yeah, so it really depends. And in terms of who I want them to see, I want people in power to see them. That's why often protests are focused on government or people like industry leaders and big businesses, billionaire corporations, because they're the people who have the power. And so we go to them and we shout and we use our voices in front of those people.
Fair enough. So just really quickly, with all the alarming statistics that are obviously coming out about the climate emergency, personally, like how do you feel knowing that in 15 years we're going to have an Arctic summer with our ice, species are going extinct? How does that personally make you feel?
A whole range of emotions, I think. Like I think I've gone through it all, whether it's like feeling sadness or grief or just pure like rage and anger. There's no one way to feel, I don't think. And I think that's why also I've taken to art more, is because I can express those range of emotions in a way that resonates with people. Because eco anxiety and eco grief and things like that, like they're just not spoken about yet enough. And so trying to kind of normalize those range of feelings is really important to me.
So when Greta famously expressed herself last year, and a few world leaders kind of lost their shit on Twitter, um, were you able to relate to her what she was saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's going back to that like burden on the youth. Like it shouldn't, like why am I having to do this? You know, fossil fuel companies have known that climate change could be a possibility since like the 80s. I wasn't even born then. Like why am I having to kind of change my career path because of the severity of the crisis? Why am I having to do this? And you know, I could take a step back because of that and just be like, well, not my responsibility. Obviously, I feel too compelled to be a part of the movement to ever do that. But yeah, it's just, it does make me feel very angry. It makes me feel very let down. And I know a lot of young people are feeling the exact same thing.
Do you feel that a lot of the young people, I mean, I think there was a recent study, psychologist, I think British study on that for children, that they actually are young people, that there's a climate emergency related sort of psychological impact, right? People are concerned that the world that they're living in is unsustainable to them and can cause such adverse impacts. And that's, I'm sure the pandemic's contributing significant to that feeling as well. But this is real. I mean, for a lot of young people, it's real. It's a real concern. It's not, it's not some bogey that politicians created to get an agenda. This is real for a lot of young people, and rightly so. So what are your sort of just trying to understand from a personal level? So how do you go about sort of creating a GIF, right? So what's the creative process like in doing something like that? So I mean, you know, people sort of guess what artists may be doing. They suddenly get inspired by something in nature or something in life, and they sit down and they sort of take brush to canvas or whatever. How does somebody like you sort of, what is the creative process, what is the thought process, and how does one create a gift that actually is a language, right? It's art plus language. It's a form of communication. How does one go about doing that?
Yeah, so kind of linking back to that conversation kind of about how it can be a toll on like young people's mental health, for example. If I were, one of the stickers I have is about eco anxiety. So it's basically like a little sad emoji face and it says eco anxiety on it. And the reason I created that was because that's how I was feeling one day. And I was kind of like, I need a way for people to be able to express this easily because I know I'm not alone in how I'm feeling about this. So the idea comes to me, sketch it out, and then just take it to my computer and do what I need to do to make it come to life, and then upload it to Giphy, and it is searchable for other people to use, and yeah, like share that same feeling with what they're sharing and the news that they're consuming, things like that.
So you first do pen and paper sort of thing, very very analog, right? You sketch it out, you draw it out, right? Okay, and then digitize, use a digital medium to do that, and then you post it up. Okay, great. So that was useful. I was just curious as to sort of it's not too dissimilar from anything else that an artist would do, I guess, right?
Yeah, not really. I know that there probably a lot of artists who do it all digitally, but like I'm someone who kind of enjoys the process of like actually drawing anyway. So it's just kind of something that I want to keep as part of my process.
Great. Karthika, sorry.
Yeah, no problems at all. Am I audible now? Sorry, just checking.
Yeah, you're much better.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. So we've talked a lot about how the activism, the art, and how a lot of the responsibilities seem to rest on your sort of generation, and yet people deny climate change is real. Why do you think this is so?
I think it's not necessary that people. I mean, I'm sure there are people who genuinely, deny climate change. You see it on Twitter. You see the people replying, being like, "Global warming is a good thing because it will keep us all warm." Um, but I do think I believe that's a very small percentage of people. I don't have the exact statistic, but from things I've read, it's not the majority. And even scientists, it's like 97% of scientists say it's a serious problem, man-made climate change. So for me, it's more about denying the fact that it will impact them, and that kind of fear of, or climate. I don't want climate change to change my life. So people, they distance themselves from the issue, and in many ways, like, I very much understand that, because it is scary. So it's, I guess, a fear response most of the time. Yeah, I do struggle with the idea that people completely deny it, because there are so many examples to show that the science is real.
True. Karthika?
Yeah. Obviously, when we were talking about the protesting, you spoke about how the artwork that you hold up depends on exactly what it is you're protesting. So, if there were two issues that you could solve, which would those be?
Ooh, that's a big question. I think something especially that I have been learning in the past year, and we've seen with the protests in America, is learning that it shouldn't even be something that I've had to learn, really, and I totally take the responsibility of being ignorant in that. But the idea that, well, not the idea, the fact that climate justice is racial justice and vice versa, that we can't solve the climate crisis without focusing on racism within our work, whether that's within kind of the movements that we're in. For example, within Extinction Rebellion, like, it's not a perfect movement, it has flaws in terms when it comes to diversity. But yeah, and recognizing the fact that there are people and groups of people and communities that will be disproportionately affected by the climate crisis, whether it's because of where they're located in the global south, or whether it's because they're in communities experiencing environmental racism. There's so many things that we have to focus on within that area. And I don't think you can say you're a climate justice activist without recognizing that. One movement that I take a lot of inspiration from is intersectional environmentalists, which was set up this year by Leah Thomas, and she's an amazing activist and has brought together many people under this intersectional environmentalist name, to kind of show that we have to put this at the center of our work. So that's one big thing. But also, as I started out my activism within fashion, I think just mass production is a huge issue for me. We'll see brands like, I don't know, H&M saying that, oh, we're recycling, or oh, we're producing an organic range, but they're not addressing the fact that they're producing millions of garments a year. And I really don't think we can achieve a sustainable fashion industry if we don't address that. So yeah, two quite big issues.
Yeah, I mean, well said, right? So there's obviously no magic wand. There's lots of work to be done. What would you say? I mean, if to our audience, right? So we've got people across the world listening. We've got people from all ages listening. If you were to sort of, make a call for action from them, so you're doing your part, right? You're creating a communication medium to sort of give expression to what people are feeling, to communicate these messages that run the gamut across all kinds of areas of environmentalism, right? But what would your call to action be for them? So if for example, let's split this so it's easier. If it's a young person, maybe the 11 or 12-year-old version of you today, what would that call to action be for young people? And then what would the call of action be to, say, somebody older, in their 30s or 40s or older?
Ooh, very good question. I always struggle with these sorts of questions because, as you say, there's not like a magic wand.
No, there you go.
I think for my 11-year-old self, it would be to just keep learning, like keep reading the books you're reading, keep listening to other people's experiences. The really one of the biggest things you can is educate yourself, because then you know what we're up against, you know what we need to focus on. And I think for older people, my friend Michaela Loach, actually, she was talking about this on Instagram like yesterday, about how it can often be seen that having conversations or using a platform with, if you've got thousands of followers on social media, is like one of the most important things, because you're reaching more people. But actually something that's really important is to have conversations within your small communities. And for example, if you're just using social media to talk to your friends, use it to talk about these conversations, because then you're breaking out of that bubble of people who are just sharing to those who are already kind of linked in, if that makes sense. So yeah, learning and talking about it, I think, really are vital. And also, as a little side point, that we need everyone. Like, it doesn't matter if you're not going out into the streets and getting arrested, because not everyone can do that. Or whether you're climbing trees, not everyone can do that. We need people to just, show up and support the people who are doing the work. Or, I even say, like, making cups of tea in a community group meeting, like, that has power. I couldn't do what I do without cups of tea.
Perfect.
Fair enough. Perfect.
Very apt. Yeah. So I think this. I think everybody can do something and should do something, I guess, is the message, right? And it can be simple as having a conversation on something that. So I mean, I think you made a very interesting point, and I think with the social dilemma, which is we're also having a show on that soon. Facebook and social media tends to sort of create these communities that are like mind, right? And so if you keep sharing and not sort of break out of that, so if you're sharing stuff with fellow environmentalists, well, okay, that's great, but that's not really expanding the awareness of the subject beyond that, right? So you have to actually intentionally and forcefully do some outreach to people who are not probably easily shareable too, right? So you have to actually go out and actually maybe talk to an older adult who's not on Facebook and have a face-to-face conversation on these issues to really start getting the awareness out there. I think that's probably what you meant by that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So Kartika, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Just speaking of, and where you said like everyone can do their part in different ways. Does that mean in some shape or form, the current generation, the younger kids, they all have to be activists for governments to start taking action?
I don't think they have to necessarily be activists. I think that term means different things to different people, but I think just being like a concerned citizen is enough, just again, having the conversations and showing that it's something that you care about is, in a way, a form of activism. So I don't think everyone should have to be doing what I'm doing, but they should be doing something, and not just young people. We need the parents, the grandparents, the uncles, aunts, whatever. We need everyone.
Well said, Tomia. And I think on that note, it will be a perfect place to stop. Thank you so much for sort of giving your insights, telling us about your story, explaining a little bit about your creative process even. It's very inspiring to listen to someone who started this journey really young. Unfortunately, the circumstances have sort of compelled you to sort of do this. I mean, you're quite happy doing your fashion thing, and then you stumble upon this whole accident that happened in Dhaka in Bangladesh, and sort of the light bulbs go off, and you have this eureka moment, and your life changes forever. And hopefully, you've changed a lot of lives in the process of doing that. So, we thank you for sort of
I have a final question. Sorry, I have a final question. Sorry.
All right, great. Yeah,
just guys, just was trying to understand. Are you a vegan? Sorry.
I'm not vegan, actually. I'm vegetarian, and I eat a lot of vegan food.
Okay.
I'm not quite there yet.
Were you going to challenge her for veganuary? Is that what you were trying to do?
Yes, we're planning to do the 31 day veganuary challenge. Lavi and I are obviously already vegan, but we're trying to challenge as many people to take it in January with us. So we'd love it if you're part of it too. We'd be featuring recipes and chefs and various different kinds of how to adopt like a vegan lifestyle, basically.
Nice. I will definitely consider it.
Thank you.
Nothing like putting our guests on the spot, Kartika. So thanks again, Tomia, for sharing your insights. It's been a wonderful half an hour, and we would love to sort of have you back at some point. And maybe in a separate panel where we can get some fashion activists together as well. Maybe we can consider that so please be in touch. To all our viewers, please hit the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting content. And don't forget to click on the set reminder so you're notified about great events like this one. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of the week. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye, Tomia.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Take care.